I'm Katrina and I'm part of Sewing Cafe Lancaster. For the past few years we've started to really build up our knowledge about natural dyes and natural fibres. Our interest comes particularly from we're passionate about upcycling clothes. And the reason that we have this interest is because we're really concerned about the impact that commercial textiles has, both on the physical environment and also on human beings. So our answer to what we can do in Lancaster is to start to try and find a viable alternative to chemical dyes. And so here we are. Here's some examples of some recent dye baths that we've done. Here we've got elder leaf and we've got elderberry, so that was foraged on the Lancaster Canal. Here we've got some Tagetes and some calendula rather, and then here we've got hawthorn berries, and again these were foraged in the local area. It's absolutely amazing the amount of dye stuffs you can either find already in your home, from vegetable waste through to things in your store cupboard, or foraged in your local area. Just most parks in Lancaster will have a full range of different plant materials, so that it's perfectly okay to forage because they grow in abundance. At Claverhill Community Growing Project, which is where we've got our living collection of natural dyes. So in about 3 raised beds we've got about 20 species of different dye plants that we can grow, and the idea of growing these plants is really to act as a demonstration for people, so they can come and have a look at the plants growing and learn some information about those plants, with hoping that they'll then be inspired to perhaps grow and make natural dyes themselves. But also we'll be collecting seeds from those dyes in the future, from those plants, where we can distribute those and encourage other people to grow. And also we can harvest the plants ourselves and use those to make our own dyes. So some of the plants that we've got in those dye beds, we've got tansy, rhubarb, eucalyptus, we've got tagetes, cosmos, calendula, we've got chamomile tinctoria, we've got coreopsis, woad, weld and madder, and quite a few others as well. So as far as what you can dye any animal or plant fibre. Synthetic fibres just won't take the colour at all. If you imagine painting on plastic, paint doesn't stick to a sort of plasticky surface. It's the same with an acrylic fibre, it just cannot take the dye. So only natural fibres, and also you could dye yarn just as it is before it's made into something, or you could dye cloth. So in this video we're going to look mainly at how you can make a hot dye, which is really the main way of making a natural dye, but there are other techniques too, and it is possible to make a cold dye or either an ice dye, so we'll have a brief look at those too. I've got another t-shirt here that's soaked in water and vinegar, and that was to a ratio of 1 vinegar for water. And again, that's boiled for 1 hour. So that's prepared, ready to dye in plant material. So here I have some little alder cones, and these stay on the trees for most of the winter, so they're a really useful dye stuff, and they're quite easy to forage. It's quite a widely available bush or tree. So today I'm going to add some cold water and then raise the temperature on the cooker, and then hopefully we'll start to see a lovely rich dark brown coming from there. So put the heat on, and now I'm just going to let that slowly rise in temperature until it gets to almost boiling point. Got my t-shirt that's been boiled in vinegar and water for an hour. That's already wet, so I don't need to re-soak it, and I'm going to put that into my Alder dye. So now I'm going to heat these to a gentle simmer, just giving them an occasional stir. So here's the t-shirt that's dyed in the alder cone dye. So making a black bean dye. So these are just standard black beans that are available in Whole Food shops and some supermarkets. They're just quite a small and actually very, very tasty bean. And the good thing about this dye is you're just going to use the water that you've soaked the beans in. So in these bowls I've got one pack of beans, and they've got about 1.5 litres of water on them. I've only done them in 2 bowls because I didn't really have a big enough bowl to soak them in. I've soaked these beans for 16 hours. I've also made this dye hot, and the colour was much duller, and I was really surprised to see how good it was when you just use the juice cold. So you can see that quite rich purple liquid. I'm just going to hang it up by its corner and leave it to dry. Whoa, I love that. So we're going to make the turmeric dye. So in here I've got about 50 grams of powdered turmeric. You could use fresh root, but I couldn't find any, so and I have used powder very successfully. So I'm just going to put that into a bowl. Then I'm going to add about 2 to 3 litres of water. Now I've mixed in the powder into the water, and I've stirred it well to get rid of any lumps, and now I'm going to leave that for about 20 minutes. So now I'm just going to pour the turmeric and the water. So I've just got a plain white pillowcase here, and I'm going to do a shibori technique. Shibori is the Japanese technique of cloth folding to create patterns. So to do this technique, it's just like as if you're going to make a fan. I'm going to use pegs and some elastic bands to tie tightly round this bundle, and wherever I tie, then less dye should better soak into the cloth. Just thinking I'm going to add a few more pegs. generally you would always put items into a dye bath wet, but for shibori or tie-dye techniques, it's better to go in dry, because wherever it's pegged, you want that area to be dry. So I'm hoping, because this is dry, the peg will stop the liquid soaking into the area underneath the peg. So with this pillowcase that I'm dyeing, I really like the idea that it's being coloured with a natural dye stuff. Chemical dyes are such unpleasant, toxic substances that for me personally, the idea of being able to dye something like a pillowcase, which spends so much time next to very close to your skin, you know, very close to your nose and your mouth where you're breathing, I really like the idea that I'll be resting my head on something that's coloured with a natural dye stuff. So I'm going to leave this in the dye bath for 2 to 3 hours, but you can see the strength of the colour that's bonded to the cloth. Moment of truth. So here's the pillowcase that I concertinaed up, and then I left it in the turmeric. So now I'm just going to take the bands off and we'll see if it's left an impression. I've got my bag of berries, so I'm just going to put those into the water. Shirt that I boiled in salt and water for an hour. I'm just going to start to add that.